Remember such a character as FSB Colonel Gherkin, also known as Strelkov. Recently a court in The Hague found Gherkin guilty of destroying flight MH17 over Donetsk in 2014. I watched his last speech and want to share some important points. If you don't filter his speech, there is a lot of nonsense and misinformation. You also have to understand that he works strictly under the protection of the FSB. But this is a separate and big topic. Its time will come for it yet. So here's what I want to point out. In this video he scolds and berates the Russian government and Putin. He emphasizes that Putin does not fulfill his responsibilities. And most importantly, he blames the Russian leadership and Putin personally, not Ukraine, for the civilian casualties in Donetsk and Luhansk. This is logical. According to the laws of war, the occupier is always responsible for civilian casualties in the occupied territories. Moreover, even if it is not an occupation, but simply a war zone, the population must be evacuated. Ukraine, for example, does this by announcing voluntary evacuation in frontline towns and assisting all civilians who decide to leave those towns that have become frontlines. And yes, 90% of the population of these cities take advantage of this opportunity, and heed the call of the Ukrainian authorities. There are no questions for Kyiv. Just as there are no questions as to why the Ukrainian side is striking at the occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. In 8 years, the Kremlin has turned Ukraine's temporarily occupied territories into gigantic military bases and Donetsk and Luhansk into gigantic logistics centers. And hitting logistics is paramount in this war, or any war for that matter. Because logistics is the mother of war. Everything starts with it, without it nothing will work. Gherkin wonders why Putin and the Russian authorities haven't evacuated people from Donetsk and Luhansk in 8 years, children, for example. These cities are on the front lines. Why aren't peaceful people evacuated from the front lines? Gherkin doesn't just berate the Russian authorities for this, he emphasizes that he would shoot someone from the Russian top brass for this. Gherkin explains that Putin and the Russian elite don't care about civilians in Donetsk and Luhansk, so nothing has been done to evacuate civilians from there. Before I continue, I ask you to subscribe to my channel, it will help to promote it. What's important in this speech? A media persona represented by an FSB colonel publicly held Putin and the Russian authorities responsible for civilian casualties in Donbass. A media persona represented by an FSB colonel publicly declared that Putin, as commander-in-chief, did not fulfill his direct and constitutional duties. A media persona represented by an FSB colonel publicly announced that if he had his way, he would have shot someone from the Russian authorities for this. I note that the further this war goes and the more the Russian side fails, I will remind you that their big winter offensive failed utterly, the more Gherkin is allowed to speak. Especially the things that could not have been thought of as late as last summer. This is very important. One can have no doubt that the FSB is sending the Russian authorities a rather direct signal about the mood in its ranks.